Chapter 1. Shadows and Sacrifices. The eerie silence of the small town was unsettling. Once a lively, vibrant place, it now lay deserted, the signs of a violent struggle etched into its very bones. Storefronts were shattered, vehicles overturned, and the streets marred with the deep claw marks and enormous beast-like footprints that wove a chaotic path through the town centre. Yet, intriguingly, no bodies, living or dead, were to be found, as if the town's population had vanished into thin air, or perhaps had been taken by whatever monstrous entity had rampaged through. Several miles away, the undead plague continued its relentless spread, an unstoppable wave of decay that swept across the countryside, consuming everything in its path. Amidst this chaos, a different kind of alliance had formed, one of necessity and desperation. The Sage, along with Varric, Alara, and a small council of elders, had agreed to protect the human camp from the endless undead hordes. In return, the humans reluctantly agreed to regular blood sacrifices to sustain their supernatural protectors. The elders' shadow power, an ancient and mystic force, proved to be a formidable counter to the undead's blight. Their dark energy could disrupt the unnatural life force animating the undead, causing them to collapse into dust. As another wave of undead approached the human camp, Varric and the Elder Council prepared for defense. With precise and fluid movements, they weaved through the horde, their shadowy forms slicing through the decayed flesh as easily as knives through paper. From the shadows, two figures watched the scene unfold, Elder and Serana. Hidden by the cloak of night, their expressions were a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "This cannot be," Serana whispered, her eyes narrowing as she observed the elders aiding humans. Why would the council help its food source? "It must be a ruse," Elder responded, his voice low and thoughtful. "The Sage must have a deeper plan. We can't trust him to act out of altruism. We must meet with him and find out what he is planning." Their suspicion was not unfounded. Elder and Serana knew the complexities of Elder politics and the often cryptic motives that drove their leaders. The Sage, as the head of the council, was particularly known for his strategic foresight and enigmatic decisions. As Varric and the council successfully repelled the undead attack, saving the human camp once more, the humans looked on with a mixture of awe and fear. They were grateful for the protection, but remained painfully aware of the price they paid. Blood for safety, an ancient bargain that felt more like a devil's deal. Elder and Serana made their way back from their vantage point, planning their approach to the Sage. They needed answers, and they needed them soon. The balance of power was shifting in ways they hadn't anticipated, and in the world of the supernatural, knowledge was as valuable as strength. As they disappeared into the darkness, the uneasy alliance between humans and elders held, for now. But in the world of Crimson Dawn, alliances were as fragile as they were necessary, and every agreement bore the seeds of future conflicts. Alliances and assaults. In the human camp, now safeguarded by the Council of Elders, unease threaded through the air like a silent fog. The camp leader, Elena, and her second-in-command, Alex, stood apart from the others, their conversation a low murmur against the backdrop of whispered worries among the camp's inhabitants. "Alex, do you really trust them?" Elena asked, her gaze drifting towards the dark figures of the elders who patrolled the camp's boundaries. "They save us from the undead, yes, but at what cost?" Alex's eyes narrowed as he followed her gaze. "I don't, and neither should you. But what choice do we have, Elena? It's either the undead or becoming blood banks for these creatures." Meanwhile, far from this camp, another stronghold called Haven stood as a beacon of human resilience. Under the leadership of Captain Knox, Haven was a fortified sanctuary, equipped with barriers and weaponry strong enough to repel the undead. The atmosphere was tense, but controlled, until an alarm shattered the calm. "Something's coming. Fast!" shouted a guard, his voice laden with urgency. Captain Knox grabbed the binoculars and peered into the distance. Her heart sank as she saw a pack of werewolves barreling towards them at an alarming speed, led by an enormous, powerful alpha. "Ready the defenses!" she screamed. The camp scrambled into action, but it was too late. The werewolves, primal and relentless, overran Haven's defenses with terrifying ease. As they tore through the camp, those who fell rose again, their bodies twisting and transforming under the lichen curse, swelling the ranks of the pack. As the Alpha led his new army away from the devastated camp, they encountered a new threat. A horde of undead approached, seemingly drawn by the chaos. The clash was immediate and brutal, with the lichens tearing through the undead with a ferocity that spoke of ancient primal instincts. This reality had changed. The undead's curse had no hold on these lichens, possibly a twist of fate engineered by Winter's hand. However, the battle took a grim turn as a new force emerged from the rear of the undead horde. Bone warriors, grotesque beings stripped of flesh with bones as hard as steel, marched into the fray. Their bone spikes caused immediate casualties among the lichens. With no flesh to bite and their powerful jaws rendered ineffective, the lichens found themselves at a disadvantage. After several losses, the Alpha, demonstrating a keen intelligence that belied his beastly form, roared a retreat. The remaining lichens quickly disengaged, following their leader away from the battlefield. The Bone Warriors, unyielding and undeterred, continued their march toward an unknown destination. Back at Haven, amidst the ruins and the despair, Captain Knox regrouped the survivors. "We need to warn others," she said resolutely. "The threat isn't just the undead anymore. Something worse is coming, and we must be ready." The world was changing. Forces beyond human comprehension were at play, and at the heart of it all, the mysterious machinations of Winter, the Sage, and other ancient beings continued to shape the fate of Crimson Dawn. The burden of eternity. In the quiet of their secluded home, Winter sat across from Mara, the weight of impending decisions casting shadows in his eyes. Mara watched him, sensing the turmoil that swirled beneath his calm exterior. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly, reaching across to touch his hand. Winter looked at her, his expression a mixture of resolve and sadness. "I've been thinking about the nature of our reality, the cycles we've been through, and what the Sage said," he began, his voice steady but tinged with a depth of seriousness that made Mara draw in a slight breath. "The continuous loop of reality. It seems it cannot change unless a significant sacrifice is made," Winter continued, his gaze locked with hers, trying to convey the gravity of his realization. "Even with all my intellect and the powers I've wielded, I can't see beyond the loop. Our actions, our struggles, they might have been played out countless times before." Mara nodded, absorbing his words, her mind racing to understand the implications. "But how can that be? Doesn't each cycle offer a chance for something new?" she asked, hope threading through her words. Winter sighed, his heart heavy. "That's just it, Mara. Each cycle feels new to those within it, because our memories of the past resets are wiped clean. We think we're making new choices, forging new paths, but in reality, we might be treading the same ground over and over. The Sage hinted that this cycle, our life, our battles, might just be one of many, or perhaps thousands." Seeing Mara's distressed look, Winter reached out to comfort her. "But there's hope," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "I believe I've found a way to break this cycle, to give us and everyone a real chance at a final resolution. Mara's eyes searched his, a mix of fear and faith playing out across her face. "What needs to be done?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Winter paused, his resolve firming. "A sacrifice," he cryptically explained. "A profound one that could untangle the threads of this perpetual loop. It's something only I can do." He stopped short of revealing the true cost of this act, not wanting to burden her with the knowledge that he might have to sacrifice himself. "But what does that mean for us? For you?" Mara pressed, her concern growing. Winter smiled, a sad, tender gesture. "It means that we may finally have a chance to live in a world free of these endless battles and resets. A stable reality." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the world he wished to save, his back to Mara to hide the sorrow in his eyes. "I know what must be done, and while the path is fraught with uncertainty, it's a path I must walk alone," he said, his voice steady yet distant. "For us, for everyone." Mara rose and joined him by the window, slipping her hand into his. Together, they looked out at the peaceful scene before them, each lost in their thoughts about what the future might hold, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The Bone March. As the shadows lengthened around the human camp, the Council of Elders once again found themselves defending against an undead onslaught. With practiced ease, they wielded their shadow powers, slicing through the staggering, decayed bodies of the undead, turning them into dust before they could breach the camp's defenses. The camp, though tense, had grown accustomed to these regular sieges and relied heavily on the supernatural abilities of their protectors. However, today's battle took an unexpected turn. From the rear of the horde, a group of 100 grotesquely transformed undead, bone warriors, advanced with unnerving coordination. Unlike their decayed counterparts, these warriors were encased in thick hard bone armor, each step they took resonating ominously with the ground. The elders engaged them with their shadow powers, expecting the same swift victory, but their energies merely slid off the bone warrior's armor without effect. One elder, caught off guard, was impaled on a warrior's spiked armor. His scream echoed through the camp as he evaporated into shadow, his essence utterly wiped out. Panic briefly seized the remaining elders as they witnessed the new threat's immunity to their powers. With no other choice, they quickly retreated behind the camp's barriers. At the barrier, Varric awaited, his face etched with concern as the news of the bone warriors reached him. Elena and Alex moved up to the front lines, where human guards were already in position with their firearms and automatic rifles, saved for dire emergencies. These weapons, though rarely used, were maintained meticulously for moments like this. With calm efficiency, Elena gave the order to fire. The barrage of bullets that followed was thunderous, the impact shattering the bone armor with lethal precision. The bone warriors, despite their daunting appearance, fell one by one, their unnatural armor no match for human ingenuity and firepower. Soon, the ground was littered with the remnants of what had once seemed an invincible force. The echoes of empty magazines rang out soon after, a sobering reminder of their limited ammunition. Amid the wreckage, Alex turned to Varric with a wry smile. "It seems we're not as helpless as some might think," he remarked. "And this time, it was us who saved you." Varric, ancient and wise, returned the smile with a nod of respect. "Indeed, and for that, we are grateful," he acknowledged. It was then that two new shadows materialized within the camp. Elder and Serana stepped forward, greeted first by silence, then by cautious acknowledgement from Varric and the other elders. "Brothers and sisters," Elder began, his voice carrying a tone of solemnity mixed with urgency. "We have come to aid you," Varric responded with a measured tone. "Eldor, it has been a long time. You are, of course, welcome among the council." He then turned to Serana, adding warmly, "And Serana, it is a joy to see you again." Eldor's gaze swept across the assembled faces before he asked, "Where is the sage?" Varric's expression turned grave. "No one has seen the sage for days. He is on a quest to save us all," he replied, his voice heavy with the weight of unsaid fears. The camp fell silent, each person pondering the implications of the sage's absence and the new alliances forming in the face of unending threats. The uneasy peace held tenuously as shadows grew deeper and the night colder, heralding the trials yet to come. The inevitability of the loop. In the depths of a hidden laboratory, shielded from the world by layers of secrecy, Winter and the sage convened. The air was thick with the musk of old books and the hum of active machinery, a testament to Winter's relentless pursuit of understanding the forces at play in their ever-repeating reality. "I understand the loop," Winter began, his voice resolute, his eyes fixed on a series of diagrams and temporal models displayed on the screens around them. The sage listened intently, his expression a blend of curiosity and concern, intrigued by Winter's discovery, yet uneasy about the implications. Winter continued, "Every reset of reality, every cycle we experience, it inevitably leads us back to a similar path. It's like a stream returning to the sea, no matter how it twists and turns." He gestured to the models that illustrated timelines, branching and reconverging repeatedly. "The loop persists because reality hasn't yet found its correct path. It's like an equation seeking balance, a system attempting to correct itself until it stabilizes," Winter explained, his tone didactic, yet tinged with a hint of sadness. "And it will continue to do so, endlessly." The sage, absorbing every word, finally spoke. "And how do you propose we break this cycle? What is the fulcrum upon which our fate pivots?" Winter paused, his gaze dropping to the floor before meeting the sage's ancient eyes. "The only way to stop the loop is for me to die at the hands of the Alpha," he stated plainly, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. The sage leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Why? Why must it be the Alpha? And why must it be by death?" Winter sighed, turning back to his diagrams. "Because the Alpha, being directly created and influenced by my actions and choices, represents a counterbalance to my existence. My death at his hands would signify the ultimate sacrifice, breaking the endless cycle of power and control I've inadvertently perpetuated. It's not just about death. It's about restoring a balance that my continued survival disrupts." He explained further, "The loop is like a safety mechanism, a way for reality to try different outcomes in the hope of finding a stable configuration. But as long as I remain, as long as I manipulate and reshape events to prevent the Alpha's true nature, the cycle will persist." The sage nodded, understanding dawning. "So, your death would not be an end, but a release, a way to allow the natural course of events to proceed without your interference." "Yes," Winter affirmed, "and in doing so, perhaps reality can finally settle into a configuration that doesn't require resets. A reality where the streams no longer need to seek the sea because they found where they naturally belong." The implications were clear, and the decision monumental. As they sat in the quiet hum of the lab, both Winter and the sage pondered the profound simplicity of the solution. It was a paradox, where the end of one was necessary for the peace of many. Now it was a matter of when and how to orchestrate such an event that could potentially free them all or doom them to perpetual repetition. Unforeseen sacrifices and battle tides. Mara sat alone, her gaze lost to the horizon. Intuition, a silent whisperer of truths, told her what Winter planned. A mix of dread and guilt knotted within her, the sacrificial nature of his decision weighing heavily on her heart. Was her revival the catalyst for all this chaos, or was it merely another thread in the complex weave of this reality? She looked up at the sky, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and silently cursed the unseen forces orchestrating their fates. Meanwhile, at the human camp, the arrival of new survivors stirred the air with fresh urgency. Captain Knox, alongside a few survivors from Camp Haven, relayed their harrowing experiences with the Lycans. Their tales filled the camp with a tense anticipation of what might come next. Eldur and Serana exchanged uneasy glances as they listened. Varric, observing their discomfort, questioned them directly. "You have encountered these Lycans before?" "Yes," Eldur replied, his voice tight with memory. "They attacked our home, killing many of our kin," Serana added, her voice cold, "and it was completely unprovoked." Varric pondered their words. "We have means to halt the undead, but these new bone warriors present a fresh challenge, and the Lycans are deadly to our kind. We must convene a council to forge a path forward." Elsewhere, the Lycan Den, a formidable fortress built into a hillside, surrounded by natural defenses, faced its own dire circumstances. The initial clash with undead scouts was quickly followed by a more ominous threat. A large battalion of bone warriors advanced upon the den. The ensuing battle was fierce. Lycans fell under the relentless assault of the bone warriors, their bodies unable to withstand the unyielding brutality of bone against flesh. As the Lycan's ranks thinned, the Alpha emerged, his eyes blazing red with a primal force. With each warrior he struck down, the ground shook under the power of his fury. However, even his formidable strength seemed insufficient against the unrelenting wave of bone. The situation grew desperate. The few remaining Lycans were driven back, cornered with seemingly no hope of escape. The bone warriors, methodical and emotionless, advanced to deliver the final blow, but then, inexplicably, they halted. The battlefield fell eerily silent. The only sound, the labored breathing of the battered Lycans. A familiar voice then cut through the tension, clear and resonant. "Hello, old friend." The final sacrifice. Winter approached the weary Lycans, stepping over the broken terrain littered with the remnants of battle. The pack, battered and bleeding, instinctively snarled at his approach, their primal instincts on high alert, but at a commanding roar from the Alpha, they reluctantly stood down, their growls subsiding into wary silence. "These creatures are indeed formidable," Winter remarked as he surveyed the bone warriors. With a casual wave of his hand, each bone warrior collapsed, their animated forms suddenly rendered lifeless. "There, that's better," he said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed at odds with the ease of his actions. The scene was surreal. A man in a chrome mask, standing alone among fierce werewolves, and the primal Alpha towering over him. Winter turned to face the Alpha, his gaze unwavering despite the obvious danger. "The only reason I still stand here, my friend, is because of the bond we share," Winter began, his voice soft but firm. "No matter the circumstance, this bond cannot be broken, and I know you will never harm me, as a son protects his aging father." He paused, allowing his words to sink in, the gravity of the moment palpable in the air. But this must not be. The loop must be broken. And for that to happen, you must kill me. The Alpha's growl was low and mournful, the weight of Winter's request evident in its stance. Soon, I will remove all memories of me from your mind. You will see me as just a man before you, and you will do what must be done. But know this, I love you as my son, now and until the end. A father's love knows no bounds, and this sacrifice is for you, for the world, and for my beloved Mara. Watch over her when I am gone. The words hung heavy between them. The Alpha, primal and powerful, a creature of terrifying strength and resolve, looked down at Winter. A single tear glistened in the moonlight as it fell from the Alpha's eye, his head slowly shaking from side to side in a silent, desperate denial. Winter's resolve did not waver. I must, he stated simply, the finality in his voice echoing the tragic inevitability of their fate. Winter stood solemnly, his chrome mask now removed, revealing the face of a man resigned to his fate. His arms stretched wide, he embraced the moment not as an end, but as a transition. This is not the end, old friend, but merely the beginning. He spoke gently to the Alpha. We shall meet again, and it will be glorious. The Alpha's eyes, filled with a palpable plea, mirrored the torment of their bond being severed by what must come next. Winter took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of the earth and the imminent finality of his decision. He lifted his gaze to meet the Alpha's, his voice steady. Let it be done. At his words, a transformation overtook the Alpha. The creature's eyes ignited with a red glow, an aura of chaos enveloping it. Its primal instincts took over as it saw before it, not the man who had raised it, but an intruder, threatening its territory, its pack. With a feral roar, the Alpha sprang forward, its movements a blur of primal energy. The confrontation was chaotic and frenzied, the Alpha embodying the very essence of the wild, unpredictable, fierce, and relentless. Winter stood still, accepting the inevitable, his figure a stark contrast to the violent flurry of the Alpha. He offered no resistance, allowing the natural order of the wild to reclaim its course. In the distance, hidden within the shadows, the sage witnessed the heart-rending scene. His presence was silent, reverent, acknowledging the gravity of Winter's sacrifice and the painful necessity of the act. As the Alpha's teeth sank into him, Winter's eyes closed gently, a soft smile gracing his lips, embracing his fate with a peace that had long eluded him. His body fell softly to the ground, the Alpha's roar echoing into the night, a sound filled with triumph and an unknowable sadness. Winter's final sacrifice, born out of love and necessity, promises a new dawn, even as it leaves behind a legacy of sorrow and change. Dawn of a new reality. In the aftermath of Winter's sacrifice, the world began to shift, the fabric of reality altering in ways unseen but profoundly felt. As the sage watched the last vestiges of the primal confrontation fade into the night, a solemn figure against the backdrop of a world transforming. The sacrifice of Winter was both a culmination and a catalyst. The sage began, his voice echoing with the wisdom of ages. His existence was a paradox, an anomaly that both sustained and distorted the natural order. Each loop of reality, while resetting events, could never truly erase the underlying fractures caused by his presence. By sacrificing himself, Winter has allowed the world to heal these fractures, resetting not just events, but the foundational errors of our reality. As the sage spoke, the world around began to change subtly. The scars of battles, the remnants of the bone warriors, and the shadows of the crimson dawn faded into nothingness. The sky lightened, heralding the true dawn, one that had been delayed by the endless loops of conflict and destruction. This reset, the sage continued, is different. It is complete, allowing the world to return to a state of true normality, a world where the supernatural forces balance each other without the overwhelming interference of an anomaly, where the stories of Eldur, Sarana, and even the Alpha exist in the echelons of myth, not as architects of chaos, but as echoes of a narrative that has found its rightful ending. The camera of the narrative panned over cities waking up to normal days, forests teeming with life, and seas calm and sovereign under the sky. Humanity, unaware of the resets, continued unburdened by memories of the apocalyptic loops they had once survived. The world you see now, the sage addressed the reader, is one where Crimson Dawn never existed in its catastrophic forms. Here, the natural and supernatural coexist in secret equilibria. As intended, stories of our battles and sacrifices remain hidden within the lore of old, lessons encapsulated in tales rather than scars upon the earth. He paused, allowing the gravity of the new dawn to sink in. Winter's love for his companions and his commitment to rectifying the fabric of reality has granted us all a new beginning. It is a rare gift, a chance to live without the shadows of our past deeds dictating our future. As the narrative closes, the sage fades back into the silhouette of the new day, his final words a whisper on the wind. Cherish this world, for it was bought with great sacrifice. Let the lessons of the Crimson Dawn remain with us, even as we step forward into a renewed existence. Reflections and reveries. The hospital room was bathed in the soft light of the morning sun, casting gentle shadows across the sterile walls. Mara lay quietly in the hospital bed, her eyes closed, her breathing even. The white sheets were neatly tucked around her, and the beep of the heart monitor provided a steady, reassuring rhythm in the background. Dr. Emerson stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing Mara's chart with a furrowed brow. Her condition hasn't improved at all, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. It's as if she's lost in her own world, unreachable. A nurse, who had been adjusting the IV drip, spoke up. Does she have any family? A husband, perhaps? No, Dr. Emerson replied, shaking his head. Apparently, she lives alone. There's no next of kin listed in her records. As they spoke, a glint of something reflective caught the doctor's eye near the window. He turned, half expectant, to see someone there, but there was nothing. Just the morning sunlight, dancing on the glass. What was that? Dr. Emerson asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. The nurse looked toward the window, then back at the doctor. I didn't see anything. Maybe it was just a reflection. The room fell silent again. The only sound, the soft hum of medical equipment. Mara continued to lie peacefully, her face serene yet inscrutable, a stark contrast to the complex web of memories and experiences hidden within her mind. Outside, the hospital's corridors buzzed with the activity of a typical day, but inside room 402, time seemed to stand still. As the narrative closes, the reader is left with the poignant image of Mara, alone yet not alone, surrounded by memories that no one else could see or understand. The fleeting glimpse of something reflective, like a mask, lingers in the mind, a symbol of the stories, sacrifices and secrets that had shaped her life and the world beyond, now lost to the loop of time and the fog of her mind. The end.